Please do make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. The night before my only son's wedding, I received a message that shattered me to pieces. It wasn't a call, not even a face-to-face conversation. Just a few cruel words dropped into my phone like poison. You are no longer part of this family. Don't come to the wedding. At first, I thought it was a mistake. My hands trembled as I dialed my son's number, desperate for his voice, for an explanation. But it went straight to voicemail. I called again, and again, silence. I sat there in my dark living room, the dress I'd carefully chosen for his big day hanging neatly in the corner, mocking me. My chest burned, my eyes ached, but my pride held me hostage. I didn't show up. And then, just hours later, before the sun had fully risen, the news came. The wedding never happened. But the reason why? That's where the nightmare truly began. I am not a woman easily broken. I've raised my son alone since the day his father walked out, juggling 2 jobs, late nights, and empty cupboards. Every achievement of his was stitched from my sacrifice, his graduation gown sewn from my sleepless nights, his first car bought from my extra shifts, his future paved with my blood, sweat, and tears. So when I was told I wasn't wanted at his wedding, it felt like someone had taken a knife and carved through my chest. I didn't cry that night. I couldn't. I sat in silence, clutching my phone, waiting, hoping that he would call back, that maybe he'd explain. But all I had were shadows and unanswered rings. By dawn, I had convinced myself of one thing: I would respect his wish. If he no longer saw me as part of his life, I wouldn't force myself into a day meant for joy. I folded my dress back into its box, pressed my trembling lips against it, and whispered goodbye. But then, just as the morning light slipped through my curtains, the call came. Not from my son. Not from his bride. But from someone who shouldn't have been calling me at all, someone who had every reason to stay silent. And the words they spoke changed everything. The wedding wasn't happening. And my son was missing. The voice on the other end of the line was shaky, almost hesitant, as if the caller was afraid of being the bearer of bad news. "Mrs. Benjamin," they whispered. "Yes, this is she. This is Detective John, with the city police." My heart stopped. Police? On the morning of my son's wedding? What happened? I asked, my voice cracking despite my attempt to sound calm. There was a pause, a long, unbearable silence where I could almost hear my own heartbeat pounding through the phone. "Your son. Justice, he didn't show up at the venue this morning. He never arrived." For a moment, I thought I hadn't heard correctly. My son. The one who planned every detail of this wedding for months. The one who was supposed to be standing at the altar in less than an hour. I gripped the phone tighter. "What do you mean he didn't show up? Where is he? Has something happened to him?" Another pause. Then the detective's tone darkened. His car was found abandoned on the highway, engine running, door open. But he wasn't there. I dropped onto the edge of my bed, cold sweat prickling down my spine. The room spun. And then, like a cruel echo, I remembered the message from the night before. "You are no longer part of this family. Don't come to the wedding." What if it hadn't been about the wedding at all? What if it had been a warning? I whispered into the phone, almost afraid to speak the thought aloud. "Detective, you think my son was taken?" The line crackled. "That's exactly what we're trying to find out." And just like that, I realized. I wasn't just a mother shut out of a wedding. I was the only person who might be able to untangle the secrets surrounding it. Because no matter how much my son had changed, no matter who had told me to stay away, I knew justice better than anyone. And if he was in danger, Then someone had just made a terrible mistake. They underestimated a mother. The detective's words echoed in my mind long after the call ended. My son's car, abandoned. Door open. Engine still running. That wasn't justice. He was meticulous, careful, almost too careful. He'd check the locks on his car twice, sometimes 3 times, before walking away. He never left anything half done. For his car to be left like that, something or someone must have forced him. I sat there, frozen, staring at the box that held my dress for the wedding. A cruel reminder. My fingers itched to call his phone again, but I knew it was useless. Still, I dialed. Straight to voicemail. Again. And again. Then I remembered something. The message from last night. I opened my phone and scrolled through it, reading those words over and over until my stomach twisted. You are no longer part of this family. Don't come to the wedding. But it wasn't signed. Not by justice. Not by anyone. It was just there. Cold. Final. And suddenly, a question hit me like a blade to the chest. What if my son never sent it? I jumped to my feet and grabbed my handbag. If the police thought I was going to sit back and wait while my son's life hung in the balance, they didn't know me at all. By the time I reached the driveway, Detective John was already there, leaning against an unmarked black sedan. He straightened when he saw me, his expression unreadable. Mrs. Benjamin, he said, walking toward me. I was hoping to catch you before you tried to come to the venue. You'll want to stay away from there, it's a mess. I narrowed my eyes. A mess. He hesitated, lowering his voice. The bride's family is in chaos. Guests have been told the wedding is postponed due to unforeseen circumstances. But that's not the truth. A chill swept through me. Then what is the truth? He studied me for a moment, as if weighing whether I could handle what he was about to say. Then he leaned closer. Your son wasn't the only one who went missing last night. My breath caught. What do you mean? The bride, she's gone too. The world tilted beneath me. Both of them. My son and his bride. I staggered back a step, clutching my car door for balance. My mind swirled with questions I couldn't voice. But one thought screamed louder than the rest. This wasn't cold feet. This wasn't a runaway bride. Something darker was unfolding. And I had a sinking feeling the message I received the night before was the first piece of a puzzle, one that someone didn't want me to solve. Detective John's words kept replaying in my head. Your son wasn't the only one who went missing last night. The bride is gone too. It felt like a cruel twist of fate. My son's happiness snatched away before it could even begin. But what cut deeper was the gnawing sense that none of this was random. Someone wanted both of them out of the picture. And I intended to find out who. Detective, I whispered, steadying my voice. You're telling me 2 young people vanished the night before their wedding, and all anyone else gets told is that the ceremony is postponed? That's not postponement, that's a cover-up. He glanced at me, his jaw tightening. You're right. But you have to understand, the bride's family has influence. A lot of it. They want this handled quietly. Of course. The Harolds. Old money. Prestigious name. They could spin a scandal into silence with a snap of their fingers. And me. I was just the single mother who raised her son from scratch, the woman they never really welcomed into their circles. I thought back to the engagement party, to the way Mrs. Harold's eyes had lingered on me like I was a stain on her perfect tablecloth. She'd smiled, yes, but it was the kind of smile that concealed daggers. Now, as Detective John stood there, I felt a sudden, sharp certainty. If I wanted answers, I wouldn't get them from official channels. Not when money and power were at play. I want to see Justice's car, I said firmly. The detective studied me for a long moment before sighing. It's at the impound lot. But Mrs. Benjamin, his voice softened. You need to prepare yourself. What we found inside, it's troubling. My knees weakened, but I forced my chin up. Show me. The lot smelled of gasoline and rust. Justice's car sat under a dim overhead light, looking almost ordinary, except for the crime scene tape fluttering loosely across the driver's side. The door was still slightly ajar, as if it had been frozen mid-flight. I reached out, fingers trembling, but John stopped me. Don't touch anything. He opened the door wider, and my stomach flipped. On the passenger seat lay a bouquet of crushed white roses, wedding flowers. Their petals smeared with something dark. Blood. My hand flew to my mouth. And tucked beneath the flowers, half hidden as though hurriedly shoved there, was a torn piece of paper. John carefully pulled it out with gloved hands, unfolding it under the weak light. There, in my son's handwriting, were 4 words that made the blood drain from my face. Mom, trust no one. Mom, trust no one. Those 4 words clung to my chest like a noose tightening with every breath. My son, my Justice, had written that. Which meant he knew something. Something dangerous enough that he couldn't say it outright. I stared at the note until my vision blurred, my heart hammering so violently I thought I'd collapse. Detective John's voice cut through my daze. We don't know when he wrote this, or why. But it means he may have left willingly, or he may have been forced. Either way, someone didn't want you involved. He was right. That text message telling me to stay away, it wasn't rejection. It was a warning. A way to keep me safe. But safe from what? I looked at the bouquet again, petals smeared crimson. Was the blood his? The bride's? Or someone else's entirely? Run the DNA, I said sharply. You'll figure it out. John gave me a careful look. We're working on it. But Mrs. Benjamin, sometimes when families get involved, things get complicated. If you want my advice. I cut him off. Detective, my son is missing. I don't need your advice. I need the truth. That night, sleep was impossible. Every shadow in my home seemed to shift, every creak of the floorboards set my nerves on edge. I sat at the kitchen table, Justice's childhood photo in my hands, the one with his toothy grin and scraped knees. He had always trusted me. And now, in his darkest moment, he was asking me to do the same for him. So I decided. If the police were bound by the Harper family's influence, then I would investigate myself. The first place to start, the bride. Jane Harold. Justice had adored her, but I'd always sensed something behind her perfect smile. She was polite, well-spoken, but her eyes hid secrets. And her mother, cold as marble. The Harolds had money. Yes, but they also had enemies. I picked up my phone and scrolled through old texts. One stood out. Weeks ago, Justice had sent me a message after a late-night fight with Emma. Mom, sometimes I think marrying into her family will cost me more than I can pay. At the time, I'd dismissed it as pre-wedding nerves. Now, I wasn't so sure. I looked at the clock, 3:47 a.m. too late for decent people, but perfect for those who thrived in shadows. I dialed the one person I thought might tell me something. A man who once worked for the Harolds. A man who owed me a favor. When he picked up, his voice was hushed, cautious. Why are you calling me about them? Because, I whispered, my throat dry. My son and Emma never made it to their wedding. And I think the Harolds know why. There was silence on the line. Then, a low warning. Mrs. Benjamin, if your son got too close to the Harolds' secrets, you're already in more danger than you realize. The man I called was named Ben Hayes. Years ago, he'd been the Harolds' driver. Loyal, discreet, until one night he showed up at my door with blood on his shirt, begging me not to ask questions as he cleaned himself up in my bathroom. He quit shortly after. But not before whispering once, in a drunken haze, that the Harolds bury more than their scandals. Now, as I sat in my car outside a dimly lit diner on the edge of town, I wondered if I was making a mistake. If what I was about to hear would make me wish I'd stayed ignorant. Ben slid into the booth across from me, his eyes darting around like a hunted man. His hair was grayer, his face more worn, but his presence carried the same unease it always had. "You shouldn't have called me," he muttered, gripping his coffee cup with trembling hands. I leaned forward. "My son is missing. So is Jane Harold. The wedding never happened. And the last thing I got from Justice was a message that told me not to trust anyone. If you know something, anything, you have to tell me." Ben's jaw clenched. He stayed silent for a long time before finally whispering, "Emma's family, they've been involved in things you don't want to know about. Deals. Partnerships. Money moving in ways it shouldn't. Justice wasn't just marrying Emma, he was marrying into their world." My heart dropped. What kind of world? Ben's eyes flicked to the window, scanning the parking lot as though someone might be listening. Then he leaned closer. The kind where people disappear when they start asking questions. The kind where a wedding can turn into leverage. Or punishment. My chest tightened. "Are you saying my son and Emma didn't run away? That they were taken?" Ben didn't answer right away. Instead, he slid a folded piece of paper across the table. "I kept this after I quit. Couldn't bring myself to destroy it. If they find out I gave it to you, I'm a dead man." My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. Inside was a photograph. Grainy. Taken at night. It showed Emma's father, Mr. Harper, standing with two men I didn't recognize, men who looked dangerous. And in the corner of the frame, barely visible, was Justice. My blood ran cold. Ben's voice lowered to a whisper. "Your son wasn't supposed to see that meeting. But he did. And now, I think the Harolds made sure he won't be talking about it." The photo shook in my hands. If Ben was right, then this wasn't about love or family anymore. It was about survival. And if Justice was alive, he was running out of time. The Harper estate sat like a fortress on the edge of town. High stone walls. Iron gates. Manicured lawns that whispered perfection. But I knew better, perfection was just another kind of prison. As I drove up the winding road, the photograph Ben had given me burned in my handbag like a live coal. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back. But I couldn't. Justice's words still echoed in my head. "Mom, trust no one." The gates opened without me even buzzing, as though they had been expecting me. That alone sent a chill crawling up my spine. Mrs. Harper greeted me at the door, her smile razor-thin, her pearl necklace gleaming like armor. She didn't look surprised to see me. "Mrs. Benjamin," she said smoothly, stepping aside. "I was wondering how long it would take before you came knocking." Her words knocked the air from my lungs. She knew. Inside, the house smelled of polished wood and expensive secrets. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors lined the walls, their eyes following me as I walked. We sat in a parlor that looked too pristine to be lived in. She poured tea into china cups, her hands steady, her expression unreadable. "You've caused quite a stir," she said casually, as though we were discussing the weather. Calling old employees. Asking questions. That's dangerous, for a woman in your position. I clenched my fists beneath the table. Where is my son? Her lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. Justice made choices. Choices that brought him consequences. Perhaps he should have thought twice before involving himself in things beyond his understanding. My pulse raced. If you've hurt him. She cut me off, her tone like ice. I didn't say we hurt him. But when you wander into other people's games, Mrs. Benjamin, you should be prepared to pay the price. Her words hung in the air like poison. I reached into my bag and pulled out the photograph, slamming it onto the polished table between us. Then explain this. For the first time, her mask slipped. Her eyes flicked to the photo, then back to me, sharp as daggers. You shouldn't have that, she whispered. Which told me everything I needed to know. My son hadn't just stumbled into danger. He'd seen something he was never meant to see. And now, I realized with bone-deep dread, the Harolds knew I had seen it too. Mrs. Harold's eyes lingered on me as though she were measuring how much of a problem I could become. Then, with one graceful flick of her wrist, she picked up the photograph from the table. You've made a mistake, Mrs. Benjamin, she said softly, folding the photo as if it were nothing more than a receipt. A dangerous one. I leaned forward, my voice trembling but firm. Where is justice? Her smile was almost pitying. Your son has a habit of putting his nose where it doesn't belong. He should have known better. She sipped her tea, calm, unhurried. Now you're following in his footsteps. That's unfortunate. I gripped the edge of my chair. If you think you can scare me. Oh, I don't need to scare you. Her tone sharpened. You've already been warned once, haven't you? Don't come to the wedding. You didn't listen then. And here you are, again, where you don't belong. My breath caught. How did she know about that message? Mrs. Harper set her teacup down with a delicate clink and leaned closer. We don't like loose ends in this family. If you keep digging, you'll end up like Justice. Gone. For a moment, the room spun. My fists clenched on my lap, nails biting into my palms. Every part of me wanted to scream, to lunge across the table and demand the truth. But I forced myself to stay still. Because now I knew something important. Justice was still alive. She hadn't said he was dead. She'd said gone. That was different. Deliberate. I swallowed the fire rising in my throat and stood, my legs shaking. You can threaten me all you want. But I'll find my son. And when I do, everyone will know what this family is hiding. Her smile didn't falter. Careful, Mrs. Benjamin. Some truths can bury you deeper than any lie. That night, when I returned home, my world shifted again. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the lights were on. And sitting on my kitchen table, as though someone had been waiting for me to find it, was a single envelope. With trembling hands, I tore it open. Inside was a photograph. My son, Justice. His hands bound. His face bruised. His eyes wide with fear. On the back, scrawled in sharp, angry ink, were just 3 words. Stop. Or else. I must have stared at that photograph for hours, the edges crumpling under my shaking fingers. Justice's face haunted me, blooded, terrified, but alive. Alive. That meant there was still time. But the message was clear. Stop. Or else. For a moment, despair almost swallowed me whole. What could I, a single mother with no power, no money, do against a family like the Harolds? They had influence, men who cleaned up their messes, detectives in their pockets. And all I had was the truth, and the stubborn love of a mother who refused to give up. I slid the photo into my coat pocket. If they thought fear would silence me, they didn't know me at all. But I also knew this: I couldn't do it alone. The next morning, I called Ben again. His voice trembled through the line. "Mrs. Benjamin, did they contact you?" "They sent me a picture of Justice," I said flatly. "He's alive. But they're using him as leverage." Silence. Then Ben swore under his breath. "I told you. You're in over your head." "Then get me out of it," I snapped. "You worked for them. You know their secrets. Help me find where they'd hide someone." He hesitated. "If I do this, there's no going back. They'll kill us both if they find out." "Ben," I whispered, my throat tightening, "they already know I'm looking. They broke into my house. They left me this photo like a warning. I don't have the luxury of turning back. My son doesn't have the luxury of waiting." Another long silence. Then finally, "Meet me tonight. Old Pier, midnight. Don't tell anyone you're coming." The hours crawled by until midnight, each tick of the clock gnawing at my nerves. When I finally reached the pier, the air was heavy with salt and fog. Ben was there, pacing, smoking a cigarette like it was the only thing keeping him alive. He looked at me, eyes hollow. "There's a place," he said quietly. "The Harold's own property outside the city. A hunting lodge. Secluded. Private. That's where they take people when they want them to disappear." My stomach twisted. "Justice?" Ben nodded grimly. "If he's still breathing, that's where he'll be." I gripped his arm. "Then take me there." But before he could answer, a sharp crack split the night. Ben's body jerked once, twice, then crumpled to the ground. A gunshot. I dropped to my knees beside him, blood spreading fast across his chest. His lips moved, faint and broken. "Don't trust anyone." His eyes went still. And in the silence that followed, I knew one thing with bone-deep certainty. Someone had been watching us the whole time. The shot still echoed in my ears as Ben's body went limp in my arms. My heart hammered against my ribs, but instinct screamed at me louder than grief: "Run." I dropped flat against the wooden boards of the pier just as another bullet splintered the railing inches from my head. Whoever was out there wasn't trying to scare me anymore. They wanted me silenced. I scrambled into the fog, crawling until I reached the edge of the pier. The icy water below churned like a hungry beast. I didn't think, I just jumped. The cold swallowed me whole. My lungs seized, panic clawed at my chest, but adrenaline drove my arms and legs. I swam beneath the surface, staying under until my vision burned. When I finally emerged, gasping, I was far enough from the pier that the shooter's outline blurred into the mist. I dragged myself onto the muddy bank, shivering, soaked, but alive. And then I remembered Ben's last moments. As he fell, his hand had pressed something into mine. In the chaos, I hadn't noticed. Now, trembling, I opened my palm. A small brass key. Old. Worn. Etched into it were 2 letters, HL. Hunting Lodge. My stomach flipped. Ben had given me the only clue I needed. Back home, I stripped off my wet clothes and collapsed at the kitchen table, clutching the key like a lifeline. Every instinct screamed that time was running out. Justice wasn't just missing, he was being held. But why hadn't they killed him yet? Why send me warnings, photographs, threats? Unless Justice had something they wanted. Something only he could give. And if they didn't get it soon, he'd be of no use to them. I wiped my face, forcing the panic down. I couldn't fall apart. Not now. I opened my laptop and searched property records. It didn't take long. One Harper estate tucked away in the woods, miles from town. An old hunting lodge, just like Ben had said. I stared at the screen, my reflection pale and haunted in the glow. This was it. The place where they were holding my son. The place where my fight would either end or begin. The road to the Harper hunting lodge twisted through thick woods, the trees pressing in on either side like silent witnesses. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. Every mile brought me closer to justice, or to my own grave. The brass key in my pocket felt heavy, as though it carried not just metal but destiny. When I finally reached the property, the lodge loomed through the trees, a hulking silhouette of dark wood and stone. The windows glowed faintly, but the air around the place was suffocatingly still, as if the forest itself held its breath. I parked the car down the road and crept on foot, every crunch of leaves beneath my boots magnified in the silence. My heart thundered, my palms slick with sweat. At the back of the lodge, I found a service door. The key slid into the lock with a reluctant scrape and turned. Inside, the air was damp, metallic. I crept through a hallway lined with mounted animal heads, their glass eyes glinting in the faint light. Each step felt like a trespass, each shadow a threat. And then I heard it. A muffled voice. Weak. Broken. Mom. My breath caught in my throat. I followed the sound down a narrow set of stairs. The basement smelled of mold and iron. At the end of the corridor, behind a heavy metal door, was a small, dimly lit room. And there he was. Justice. His face was bruised, his wrists bound to a chair. But his eyes, God, his eyes lit up when they found me. Mom, you came, he whispered, tears cutting through the grime on his cheeks. I rushed forward, fumbling with the ropes, my hands shaking. I'm here, baby. I'm here. We're getting out of here. But before I could free him, his body tensed. No, he rasped. Mom, you don't understand. You shouldn't have come. The door behind me slammed shut, and a voice, smooth as poison, filled the room. Well, Mr. Harper drawled from the shadows, isn't this touching? A mother's love. Shame it's about to destroy you both. I spun around, my back pressing instinctively against Justice's chair. Mr. Harper stepped into the dim light, his tailored suit looking grotesquely out of place in the dank basement. His smile was thin, his eyes cold and amused. I warned you, Mrs. Benjamin, he said smoothly. But some mothers just don't know when to let go. Where's Emma? I demanded, my voice raw. What have you done with her? A flicker crossed his face, something between irritation and satisfaction. Emma was always too curious for her own good. Much like your son. Justice struggled against the ropes, fury in his voice. Mom, don't listen to him. He's trying to twist it. Quiet, Harper snapped, his tone sharp as a blade. He turned back to me, his eyes narrowing. Do you know what your son stumbled into, Mrs. Benjamin? What he saw the night before the wedding? I swallowed hard, clutching Justice's shoulder. He saw enough to know you're hiding something. Harold's laugh was low, dangerous. He saw everything. A business arrangement, with men whose names never appear on paper. Justice thought he could expose us. Naive, really. He thought marrying Emma meant he could shield her from the truth. He was wrong. I felt Justice tense beneath my hands. Mom, he whispered hoarsely, they're laundering money through charities, through companies no one questions. I found the files. Emma helped me. That's why they took us. They think we still have them." Harold's smile vanished. His voice dropped into a growl. "Where are they?" My heart pounded so violently I thought it would burst. The files. Proof. That's why Justice was still alive. That's why Emma had vanished. The Harolds weren't protecting a family name, they were protecting a criminal empire. I forced my voice to stay steady. "If you've done anything to my son, anything to Emma." "Don't pretend you're in control here," Harper interrupted coldly. "Your son's fate depends entirely on how useful he remains. And as for you, Mrs. Benjamin," he leaned closer, his breath hot against my ear. "Consider this your last warning. Leave this place. Forget what you've seen. Or you'll leave here in a body bag." He straightened, snapping his fingers. Two men emerged from the shadows, broad, armed, merciless. They grabbed me, yanking me toward the door. Justice's voice cracked, desperate. "Mom, don't let them, don't give them what they want." I struggled, clawing, screaming, but their grip was iron. And just before the door slammed shut again, I locked eyes with my son, eyes burning with a message only I could understand. The guards shoved me out into the cold night, gravel biting into my palms as I stumbled. The heavy door slammed behind me, locking my son inside that cursed lodge. For a moment, I just knelt there, gasping, trembling. My mind screamed at me to run, to drive far away and pretend none of this was real. But Justice's eyes haunted me. His last look hadn't been fear, it had been a plea. "Expose them." I wiped my bloody palms against my coat and forced myself to think. If I wanted to save him, I couldn't rush in with emotion. I had to play their game. I crept back to my car, praying the guards hadn't slashed my tires. Miraculously, it started. But instead of heading home, I drove to the only place I thought might still hold the answers, Emma's apartment. The building was dark, her unit sealed off with yellow tape like a crime scene. But I knew Emma. She was clever, cautious. If she and Justice had uncovered something, she wouldn't have left it out in the open. I slipped inside, my heart hammering as I climbed the stairwell. Every creak of the steps felt like a gunshot. When I reached her door, I noticed the lock had been forced recently, probably Harold's men searching for the files. Which meant whatever Emma had hidden, they hadn't found it. I tore through the apartment, searching for anything, loose floorboards, hollow walls, vents. And then, in the back of her closet, I found a small lockbox duct-taped beneath the shelf. My fingers trembled as I pried it loose. Inside were a flash drive, a stack of printed documents, and a note written in Emma's hurried scrawl. "If anything happens to us, give this to the police. Trust no one else. Not even my family." My throat closed as I held the papers. They were records, bank transfers, shell companies, offshore accounts, all pointing straight to Harold's empire. This was it. This was why my son was still alive. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked behind me. I froze. A shadow shifted in the hallway. Someone was here. Looking for something, a voice drawled. I spun around, clutching the lockbox to my chest. One of Harold's men stood in the doorway, gun gleaming in his hand, his smile thin and merciless. "Don't save me. Expose them." The man stepped into the room, his footsteps slow, deliberate, like a predator closing in on its prey. The gun in his hand gleamed under the dim hallway light. "Hand it over," he ordered. His eyes flicked to the lockbox clutched against my chest. "Mr. Harper doesn't like people snooping where they don't belong." My heart thundered, but I forced my voice to steady. "If you shoot me, you'll never get what's inside this box." He smirked. Lady, you're not in a position to bargain. I took a careful step back, keeping the bed between us. My mind was racing. Men like him weren't driven by loyalty, they were driven by fear and greed. Maybe I could twist that. You think Harold's going to share this with you? I said, my voice sharp. Do you even know what's in here? It's worth millions. Files that could destroy him, or make the man who has them untouchable. For the first time, hesitation flickered across his face. His grip on the gun loosened, just slightly. You're bluffing. I opened the lockbox just enough for the flash drive to glint under the light. Am I? I whispered. His eyes locked on it like a starving dog eyeing meat. He licked his lips. Give it to me. I'll make sure Harper never bothers you again. There it was, his weakness. Greed. I took another step back, slowly inching toward the window. You think Harper won't kill you the second he finds out you tried to double-cross him? This drive is worth more than both our lives. You want it. You'll have to trust me. His jaw clenched. He wasn't used to prey talking back. He raised the gun, fury tightening his features. Don't play games with me, lady. Last chance. I forced myself to breathe, to stay calm. Behind me, the window was just a few feet away. All right, I said softly. You win. I tossed the flash drive into the air. His eyes shot up instinctively, his gun hand faltering for half a second. And in that sliver of time, I lunged for the lamp on the nightstand and swung it with everything I had. The lamp shattered against his arm, the gun clattering to the floor. I didn't wait, I dove for it, scooping it up just as he roared and charged. I aimed the gun at his chest, my hands trembling but steady enough. Don't move, I shouted, my voice shaking with fury. One step closer and you'll never see daylight again. His breath came heavy, his eyes dark with rage. But he froze. And in that moment, with the gun in my hands and the flash drive still mine, I realized something. I wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. I was holding the key to bringing down an empire. I backed toward the door, the gun still trained on Harold's man. My hands were trembling, but I refused to let him see it. Stay down, I hissed, my finger brushing the trigger. He sneered, his pride more wounded than his body. You think Harper won't find you? He owns this town. You'll be dead before sunrise. I didn't answer. I bolted. The hallway blurred as I sprinted down the stairs, clutching the lockbox against my chest. My breath tore in and out of my lungs like knives. I could hear him scrambling after me, cursing, but I didn't dare look back. Out into the night air, I ran for my car, fumbling with the keys. The engine roared to life, and just as I peeled out of the parking lot, a gunshot cracked behind me. The back window shattered, glass raining across the seats. I ducked, heart pounding, tires screaming against the asphalt as I sped into the darkness. For the first time in hours, I allowed myself a flicker of hope. I had the files. Proof of everything. If I could just get to the police. But then a chilling thought struck me. Harper had already bought half the town. What if the police were on his payroll too? Emma's note had been clear, trust no one. I drove aimlessly for miles, the adrenaline surging through me like poison. Finally, I pulled into an abandoned rest stop, cut the engine, and sat in the suffocating silence. That's when my phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. Nice drive. Did you enjoy the fireworks? My blood ran cold. Another buzz. We know where you are. You have something that belongs to me. Bring it back, and maybe I'll let your son live. I dropped the phone, my hands shaking. They were tracking me. watching me. Every second wasted put justice closer to death. Tears stung my eyes, but I wiped them away. Fear wouldn't save my son. I opened the lockbox again, staring at the files. Names. Numbers. Accounts. Enough to burn the Harper empire to the ground. And in that moment, a new kind of fire lit inside me. They wanted me terrified, broken, begging. But I was a mother. And a mother with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous enemy of all. I stared at the files spread across the passenger seat, my heart pounding. Every instinct screamed at me to hand them over if it meant saving justice. But then I remembered his eyes in that basement, fierce even through the bruises. Don't save me. Expose them. If I gave Harper the files, justice and I would both be dead. The only chance we had was to turn Harold's own arrogance against him. I powered off my phone, yanked out the battery, and tossed it into the night. If they were tracking me, I wasn't making it easy anymore. Then I started planning. The files weren't just evidence, they were leverage. And if Harper wanted them badly enough to stalk me, I could use that desperation. I drove to the only place Harper wouldn't expect me to go, the old community center downtown. It was falling apart, abandoned years ago, but I remembered something no one else did. In the basement, there was still an old public computer lab, disconnected from the internet, forgotten. Perfect for scanning and duplicating everything without leaving a trace. The building was dark, the air thick with dust, but the power still sputtered to life when I flipped the breaker. I worked quickly, feeding document after document into the dusty scanner, watching the digital copies pile up on a fresh flash drive I'd brought from Emma's lockbox. Every page felt like another weapon in my hands. Then I made the call. Not to the police. Not to the FBI. Not yet. I called Harper. His voice slid across the line like oil. "Ah, Mrs. Benjamin. I was wondering when you'd come to your senses. You want the files?" I said, forcing steel into my voice. "Meet me tomorrow night. St. Michael's Cemetery. Midnight. Come alone, or the evidence goes public." A long silence. Then a chuckle. "You think you can dictate terms to me? I think you care more about protecting your empire than killing one woman," I shot back. "But if I'm wrong, well, you'll see your name on every front page in America by morning." Another pause. Then his voice hardened. "Midnight. Don't be late." The line went dead. I sat there in the silence, trembling but unbroken. I'd just declared war on a man who thought himself untouchable. Tomorrow night would decide everything: Justice's life, Emma's fate, and whether the Harold's empire lived or burned. But I wasn't going into that cemetery empty-handed. I was going in armed with the truth. The cemetery was silent, save for the whisper of wind through crooked headstones. The moon hung low, casting long shadows across the rows of marble angels and crosses. My breath clouded in the cold night as I stood waiting, the flash drive hidden deep inside my coat pocket. Every nerve in my body screamed danger. I hadn't told a soul where I was going. Not the police. Not friends. No one. This was my fight, and Justice's life depended on it. At exactly midnight, headlights cut across the graves. A sleek black car rolled to a stop, its engine purring like a predator. Harper stepped out. Impeccable suit. Perfect tie. His silver hair gleamed in the moonlight. Behind him, two shadows slid out of the car, armed men, their weapons barely hidden. "So much for come alone. Mrs. Benjamin," Harper called smoothly, his voice carrying in the still night. "You really should have stayed out of this." I forced a bitter smile. "And miss your charming company?" "Not a chance. He smirked, stepping closer, his shoes crunching over gravel. The files. Now. I shook my head. Not until I see my son. His expression hardened. You are in no position to make demands. I let the silence stretch, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. Then I pulled the flash drive from my coat and held it up so it glinted in the moonlight. This, I said, my voice sharp, isn't just insurance. It's a weapon. I made copies. One call, and everything goes public. You want this one? Fine. But understand, kill me, and the rest burns your empire to the ground. His eyes flickered, a crack in his mask of control. But then he smiled, a slow, chilling smile. You're clever, he admitted. I see where your son gets it. But you made one mistake. He snapped his fingers. A van door slid open from the shadows. And there he was. Justice. Bound. Gagged. His face bruised but his eyes alive with fury. Two men dragged him forward, forcing him to his knees in the dirt. My heart nearly shattered. You want to play games? Harper said softly. Then let's play. The drive, for your son's life. The gunmen raised their weapons. The night closed in around me, and for the first time, I realized this wasn't a negotiation. This was an execution. My pulse hammered so loudly I thought the men with guns could hear it. Justice was on his knees, dirt smudged across his face, his eyes locked on mine. Fearless. Begging me not to give in. Harold's smirk cut through the cold air like a blade. Last chance, Mrs. Benjamin. The drive, or your son dies right here, in the shadow of angels. I forced myself to breathe. To think. If I handed over the drive, Harper would kill us both. If I refused, Justice would die in front of me. I had seconds to choose, and only one card left to play. You're right, I said suddenly, my voice steady, surprising even myself. This drive is worthless. Harold's brow furrowed. What? I held it up, my hand shaking deliberately, like I was confessing defeat. It's just a decoy. The real files. Already in safe hands. If I don't check in tonight, they'll be released. A flicker of panic crossed his face, subtle but there. His men shifted, glancing at him. Doubt. That was my opening. I pressed harder. Go ahead, kill me, kill Justice. But tomorrow morning, every paper, every agency will have your name splashed across the front page. And when they do, I looked at his men, meeting their eyes one by one. You won't be the only ones going down with him. Harold's jaw tightened. He hated that I was speaking directly to his men. He could control fear but not doubt. And doubt was a cancer. One of the gunmen hesitated, lowering his weapon just slightly. Boss, is she bluffing? Harper snapped. Shut up. She's lying. But his voice cracked at the edges, and his men heard it. That was when I made my move. In one swift motion, I hurled the flash drive high into the air. It caught the moonlight, a silver streak against the black sky. The gunmen instinctively looked up, their grips faltering. I lunged forward, slamming my shoulder into Justice's guard. He toppled sideways, and I grabbed the gun from his holster with shaking hands. Run! I screamed, tearing the gag from Justice's mouth as we dove behind a row of gravestones. Bullets cracked through the night, stone shattering around us. Justice gasped, his voice raw. Mom, you shouldn't have come. Shut up and crawl. I barked, adrenaline surging through me as I returned fire, forcing Harold's men to scatter. The cemetery erupted in chaos, gunfire, shouts, the thud of boots against gravel. Somewhere in the madness, Harold's voice rose, furious and unhinged. Find them. I want them dead. And as I dragged Justice deeper into the shadows of the graveyard, one truth crystallized in my mind. This wasn't just about surviving the night anymore. This was about ending Harper for good. We ran like the world had ended. Gravel crunched under our hands and knees as we scrambled between headstones, lungs burning, ears ringing with gunshots and Harold's furious voice. The cemetery, so quiet and holy at dawn, had become a battlefield. Justice crawled beside me, his breath ragged, the rope's abrasions still stinging his wrists. He was bleeding where a slug had nicked him, nothing life-ending, but enough to make each frantic second feel like a countdown. He kept whispering my name like it anchored him to the world. Every time he did, I swallowed the urge to sob. We made it to my car by some miracle. I floored it, tires fishtailing on the gravel road. Behind me headlights chased, then faded as Harold's men split off to comb the area. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope maybe we'd bought enough time. We didn't go home. We went to the only person I still trusted, Detective John. He was waiting in a shabby diner at dawn, 2 coffees cooling in front of him. When he saw us, his face crumpled into something I couldn't read: relief. Guilt. All of it. Get him in the back, he said, directing the paramedics he'd called discreetly. He had a calm I hadn't seen before, a lean that suggested long nights of compromises. You did good, he added to me, and though he tried to make it sound simple, I heard the weight behind it. He slid a small, sealed envelope across the table to me. This came in last night. Anonymous. Think of it as backup. The envelope contained copies of wire transfers, receipts, emails, more than Emma's lockbox had held. Someone else had been watching the Harolds, someone with the means and nerves to collect proof. Someone who had waited for the right moment. Who gave you this? I asked. He shrugged. Doesn't matter yet. What matters is we've got enough to force a takedown. Federal level. His eyes met mine steady. You did what I couldn't. You exposed a monster. But then his face darkened. They'll move fast to discredit you. Expect lawsuits, smear campaigns. And expect Harper to use everything he has left. His voice softened. Are you ready for that? I didn't hesitate. I'll do whatever it takes. Justice reached for my hand, and I squeezed back like a lifeline. When Justice was patched up and dozed in the backseat of the cruiser, I demanded the truth, every ugly, brilliant detail he'd withheld. You said don't save me, he kept repeating. I meant it. Not because I wanted you to stand by, but because I needed you to make it public. I couldn't risk you being dragged in before the plan was set. His voice was rough, but steadier now, the adrenaline replaced by a clarity I hadn't seen since his childhood scraped-knee days. Emma and I found the ledgers last month. She traced payments through charities, shell corporations, an old construction company Harper used as a front. She was clever enough to set up dead drops, encrypted backups. I thought we could finish it, hand it to John, and it would be over. We were wrong. He swallowed. Emma didn't go missing. She staged it. I didn't know at first. She told me she had to go dark to get safer access to a server. It was going to be safe until Harper found out. They panicked. They took both of us. My breath hitched. Emma had been both brave and terrified. She'd risked everything to save more than she loved. Where is she now? I asked. Justice's jaw tightened. Not in the lodge. They moved her somewhere else when things escalated. I saw her on a security feed. She was being kept in a different Harper property. That's why Harper wanted the drive so badly. He thought destroying the physical copy would bury everything. He didn't know copies existed. He didn't know someone would send John the extra packet. John listened quietly, then rose. I'm calling in federal agents. Not City PD. Not the local prosecutor. We need an unassailable chain of custody and simultaneous warrants before Harper moves any assets. He pulled out his phone and started making calls. In that diner, the fluorescent lights seemed too bright, like they were spotlighting a turning point. I felt oddly calm, despite the exhaustion. For the first time since the note told me not to attend the wedding, the path forward felt honest. Expose, indict, press charges, rescue Emma, dismantle Harold's network. We had to move now. They struck at noon. Federal agents, John at the lead, moved like a well-oiled machine. We hit 3 properties at once: the Harper safe house where Emma had likely been shifted, a mid-city office holding financial documents, and the big Harper estate, to prevent any last-ditch burning of evidence. I rode with John to the Harper safe house. The neighborhood looked ordinary, a facade for something rotten. My palms were ice as we approached. I clutched the extra flash drives in my jacket like rosary beads. They tore through doors with battering rams. I remember the sound of wood splitting, men shouting, boots slamming against tile. For a terrifying second I feared Harper would get to Emma first or, worse, to us. Then a woman ran out, face streaked with mascara and soot but a live Emma. She looked at me for half a second and I saw 5 months of fear wiped from her face. She staggered into my arms like the prodigal daughter, and I held her like I'd been holding my breath for years. Thank God, she whispered, hands trembling. They moved me last week. I thought. Her voice broke and she clung to me. John intercepted Harold's men at the estate. I stood there, watching the blue uniforms cordon off driveways, watching federal agents carrying out boxes of documents, servers, and ledgers. The Harolds protested, lawyers screaming into phones, but the warrants were clean, sealed, federal. By evening, Harper was in cuffs. He didn't fight much. The grandeur drained from his face like paint peeling off a statue. Mrs. Harper was escorted out in a satin robe, expression blank, the pearls gone. It wasn't pretty. It was messy and legal and painfully slow. But the net tightened in a way nothing else could: audits, indictments, seizures of assets. The unstoppable machinery of law began to grind down the illusion Harper had built. The headlines weren't immediate, but when they came, they were brutal. The papers ran exposés with lines I'd once thought fanciful: offshore accounts, charades of charities, bribed officials, payoffs. Harold's name became a stain that no amount of money could scrub. There were hearings. Depositions. The Harolds' empire buckled under scrutiny. Some allies of Harper fled. Others flipped, offering testimony in exchange for immunity. Ben's name was read aloud, and I felt the prick of hot grief all over again. He'd paid with his life for a truth that now mattered. Justice testified. He read aloud emails and records Emma had uncovered, his voice steady through the courtroom like an instrument tuned by trauma. He admitted his mistakes, underestimating the Harolds, thinking love could shield him. The judge listened. The jury listened. Justice, imperfect and blind and human, began its slow work. People I hadn't expected to see lined the courtroom: neighbors, former employees, even the detective who'd stayed faithful to the truth. John, worn, decisive, watched with the look of a man who'd finally seen the scales tip. We lost things we'd never imagined losing in the process: privacy, time, the comfortable anonymity of quiet lives. Lawsuits arrived from Harold's lawyers. Threats and slurs came in late-night calls that traced back to servers overseas. But for each blow, there was a counter: witness testimony, bank records, televised interviews with journalists who refused to be intimidated. When Harper was finally convicted on multiple counts, money laundering, racketeering, bribery, his world collapsed into a single, quiet cell. He looked small in that courtroom. Rich men don't become small often enough. It was a strange mercy to watch him reduced to a man who couldn't buy his freedom. The wedding never happened as planned. The throne rooms and the silver, the rehearsed vows, they were ashes of an illusion. But we found a different way to honor what Justice and Emma had tried to build. After the trials, after the cameras left and life resumed a new shape, Justice and Emma married, quietly, in a small church near the hospital where Justice recovered. I walked him down the aisle. His suit was simple. Emma wore no pearls. Their hands were clasped without an audience of scandalmongers, only the people who had become family through fire: John, who'd stayed until the end, a few brave neighbors, Emma's uncle who had finally turned against his family, and me. Justice stood taller than I'd seen him in years, but there were shadows in his smile, reminders of the night he'd been bound in a lodge. He squeezed my hand before he spoke his vows and mouthed, "Thank you. I didn't need more." Afterward there was no grand reception, only a small dinner filled with awkward laughter and grave toasts. We talked about rebuilding, about how the charity Emma had been coerced into would now be repurposed into something honest, with careful oversight. We discussed Ben's memory, planning a small dedication at the community center. We didn't pretend the world had been put right. But something had snapped in us, a clear line between what we'd been and what we would be. Justice and Emma's love survived not because it was perfect, but because it had been tested in the worst way and chosen again. Weeks after the conviction, one last envelope came. No threats, no demands. Just a single, small note tucked inside. It read, "We had to protect you. We had to protect him. You were right not to come the first night. Some things, like mothers, must watch and act from the shadows." There was no signature. I knew, though. The handwriting was a poor imitation, but who else could have written such a thing? Emma. Ben. Detective John. Someone who'd helped us pull the thread. Maybe all of them. I pinned that note above my kitchen table. Sometimes at night I catch sight of it and I think of that awful message the night before the wedding: "You are no longer part of this family. Don't come to the wedding." At the time it had felt like a knife. Now I understand it as an awful, imperfect shield. Someone, perhaps even Justice, in the very last moment before they abducted him, had tried to keep me safe. The intention didn't make the hurt easier, but it made the truth bearable. They had loved me enough to push me away so I could fight. We rebuilt in small ways. Justice went back to work. Emma threw herself into rebuilding the charities with new, transparent leadership. I took a job at the community center, overseeing the program we'd long talked about funding. We held a small memorial for Ben. The town came in unexpected numbers. People who had once been frightened of the Harolds brought flowers. There are scars we will carry forever. There are nights when Justice wakes up sweating, when the image of that basement returns like a bad dream. But there is also laughter. There are dinners with friends who became family, quiet mornings where the coffee tastes like the ordinary promise of another day. And sometimes, when the house is still and the moon slants through my window, I take the dress down from the closet, the one I never wore to his wedding, and I press it against my face. I whisper into the fabric the things I didn't say in the dark: "I forgive you. I am proud of you. I never stopped loving you." The world took a piece of our innocence the night the Harolds tried to bury the truth. But it did not take us. We survived. We exposed. We mourned and we loved again. If you asked me now whether I'd go back and walk into that chapel the night they told me not to come, I would say, no. I wouldn't have been able to do what I did later if I'd been there then. Sometimes the cruelest words are the ones that save us. I learned, in the end, that family isn't only the people who invite you to a shiny table. Family is the hand that squeezes yours in a dark room, the friend who throws themselves in harm's way, the stranger who sends an anonymous packet that unravels a kingdom. Family is the truth we fight for. And when force and greed tried to make my boy disappear, it was love, stubborn, foolish, relentless, that brought him back.